My name is Lydia Newroth, and I serve as the project manager for Virginia Untold at the Library of Virginia. In this video, I describe my research journey uncovering the story of two enslaved men using records from the Richmond City Hustings Court. The latter part of this video highlights the importance of Richmond as a locality and why these records are unique.
This particular story was actually a blog post that I wrote when I first started here as project manager. I came across this information in the Richmond City Hustings Court records that I was processing. Tazewell was an enslaved man living in Richmond City, and he actually runs away in 1856. He is actually aided in his escape by his uncle, Richard, who's also enslaved in Richmond City. Essentially, I know all of this because Richard comes into the store and tells his friend Columbus, who's also enslaved, all the details of what has happened here. And that is actually Richard's downfall, because Columbus goes and tells the city sergeant what he's learned from Richard, and the city sergeant arrests Richard and charges him with the crime of aiding an enslaved person to abscond. And that's the document you see on the left side of the screen there. Richard explains to Columbus a number of different details related to Tazewell's escape, including that he helped him get away with $40, gave him food and clothing. He gives a couple different stories for how Tazewell gets away, including going off in the cars. Then he changes it to talking about going in a boat. He provides information about a reward that's placed in the newspapers for Tazewell's capture, which immediately said to me that I should look in the newspapers for that runaway enslaved ad to see if I could find Tazewell's particular entry. And I actually did find that particular newspaper account in our Virginia Chronicle database, which is a digitized resource of Virginia newspapers that are available through the Library of Virginia. So it's a great resource if you are doing newspaper research. Again, this is free. The newspaper ad, the runaway ad, gives me so much information about Tazewell. It tells me how old he is, his physical description. It provides the name of his wife, who was a free woman, where she lives. It confirms the name of Tazewell's enslaver and even where he's located. I used all of this information to find more information about Tazewell's wife, Eliza, who shows up actually in the minute books. She loses her free papers a number of times, and she's actually put in jail for not having her free papers. I learned using the city directories where Thomas Jones was located. I also found out that for particular years, there are records kept of enslaved people that were escaping via the Underground Railroad through New York. So doing some additional newspaper research, I learned that Tazewell actually makes it to Canada. He sends a letter to Richard, which the letter I have not found, but the newspapers indicate that he sends a letter to Richard indicating that he's made it safely. Well, since I know that Tazewell has made it north, I learned about this Record of Fugitives book that just happened to be created in one of the years that Tazewell runs away, 1856. And I thought to myself, there was no way that I could possibly find Tazewell. But I actually do. He shows up on the right side of the screen here. The bottom entry, March 20th, 1856, is an entry for Tazewell Robinson, who belonged to Thomas Jones, a grocer of Richmond, which is how Thomas Jones is referred to in the city directory. It explained to me that he walks to City Point, which is modern day Hopewell, Virginia. Explains that he gets on a steamer, which is confirmed in the newspapers, and that he makes it all the way to an outpost in New York. The newspapers confirm that he makes it into Syracuse, and from there he goes into Canada. All of this started with a bundle of papers that looked very much like this. I pulled out this court case, and I could have never realized, if I hadn't followed this trail, that all of this information existed about Tazewell. I was able to find this entire story because we decided to open this box. So I think it just showcases the real power of digitizing these records and making them available. Unfortunately, Richard is sentenced. He's tried and convicted. He's sentenced to 10 lashes and to be sold. And I actually don't know what happens to Richard. All of this, again, is documented in a 2-part blog series that I wrote and can be accessed using those URLs on the screen there. I like this story of Richard and Tazewell because it talks about it certainly demonstrates sort of the interesting things that are going on in Richmond at this time. Certainly how active the Underground Railroad is, and a number of enslaved people are trying to escape using the help of other enslaved people. They're also using the help of free white and other free Black individuals in the city. And you can just see how Richmond is attracting a lot of different populations and illuminating a really interesting form of urban slavery that I don't think we always understand or talk about as well as maybe this traditional form of slavery that some of us are more familiar with. The Richmond City Hustings Court records, which we really hope to put online very soon, are also really important because no register book survives or was maintained even for Richmond City that we know of. What we actually think is happening is the clerk is using the minute books to record these registrations. But it just means that the loose records, so that means these criminal trials, but also free registration papers, petitions to remain, freedom suits, all of these loose documents from the court help to tell the story of free people of color in the city, since we don't have that register book.